everyone. Welcome to the Trial Site News interview series. I'm Dr. Erin, your host, and today we're chatting with two people from Medable, which is a really cool company doing a lot of things around decentralized clinical trials, which we're interested in at Trial Site News. So we have with us Sanskriti Thakur and Dr. Pamela Tenaerts. And I'm sorry if I hopefully didn't massacre you guys' names, but thank you so much for joining in. It's a pleasure to have you here. So I thought maybe we could start, if you guys want to tell us a little bit about you and what you do, and also Medable in general.
Sure, fine. So my name again is Sanskriti Thakur. I am the Chief Growth Officer at Medable, and what that means is I'm looking at new ways we leverage our technologies in new markets. We're looking at how we expand to patients across the world with new geos, and we're looking at how we accelerate bringing science with new capabilities by looking at inorganic growth. So I've spent about 20 years in life sciences. Half of that has been in consulting and the other half in industry. I've been a proponent for digital health, but never been at a true digital health company until now. And the reason I'm here was my last role, I was the head of life science research at Accenture. It's got about 600,000 people and an incredibly large interest in evolving technologies across the health system and life sciences. And in that role, I was responsible for evaluating every opportunity that was out there to change the way or not necessarily change, but just transform how we bring science to market. And of course, there I learned about Medable, and here I am today and happy to be here with you.
Hi, so thanks for having us. I'm Pam Tenaerts, and I've been in clinical trials specifically for 30 years. So started with a very large cardiovascular trials, thought every trial was done that way with 42,000 patients and a 3-page CRF, only to learn over time that that obviously is not how it works most of the time. I've spent my life in various aspects of clinical trials. So in pharma, in medical device, at Duke University, DCRI, to do Clinical Research Institutes, and then also at the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, where obviously we were looking at ways to improve quality and efficiency of clinical trials. And one of the things, it was a public-private partnership with Food and Drug Administration. And one of the things we looked at is, why can't we use technology in clinical trials in the way that we use it in every day? And the FDA actually came to us in 2015, asking us to start looking at, okay, let's figure out how we can make this happen. This had been a topic, technology in clinical trials, for the past couple of years before. We had prioritized, and people were like, oh, that's too hard, we're not going to do it. So, but then when the FDA said, let's do this, everybody was like, okay, we'll do this. And so we worked on different aspects of this, sort of how do you create new measurements. Having the opportunity with digital health is really an opportunity to measure things in ways we've never measured before. And that can then be used in clinical trials to see how any new medical product is working. We looked at, what do you do with these digital health technologies, and how do you look at data? How do you manage that? Because should you measure everything? Should you just measure a few things? And then if you can do those two things, you can do decentralized trials. So then we came up with recommendations that came out in 2018 around decentralized trials. And then we also had a group looking at, well, what does that change for patients and for sites? And so we came up with recommendations around that. And Medable was a part of City, and obviously decentralization is a really good way of democratizing access to clinical trials, and a really good way of making sure more people can get involved, because research should reflect the population living with the disease. And we have historically in clinical trials not always done a good job at that. So Medable seemed like the natural place to go and to help this come to fruition. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate both of you guys introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about Medable. So there's growing interest in decentralized clinical trials, like you guys mentioned, especially now during the pandemic. So how do you think this model is going to evolve over the next couple of years? And whoever wants to chime in, go ahead.
So maybe I'll start first. So decentralized trials have not been new. They're not new. And they've been aspects of this trialed and piloted for, I think, over 15 years. And if we think about how hard we've made it for people to participate in clinical trial, whether you're the participant or the site, frankly, we've really made it hard for people to take part in this endeavor that really every time you take a medication or use a medical product, you stand on the shoulders of that research that has been done. And it should reflect people like you, and that's not always the case. So I think the pandemic helped accelerate things enormously. Obviously, we couldn't, you weren't allowed to go to sites. Sites were sent home as non-essential services and things like that. So I think the pandemic did a great job in accelerating it and sort of help us figuring out what works and what doesn't. And I think we can definitely move on that going forwards. But we really stand on like 15 years of work around this. And I think the pandemic might make it a little hard in some ways because DCTs were implemented in not the best of circumstances. You couldn't plan for it. It was sort of an emergency. Well, what are we going to do? So there might be a little bit of pushback coming from it didn't quite do what we expected it to do in certain trials. But if we can plan for this, I think this is definitely going to stay. We have a responsibility to sort of, we talk about the good it will do, and that's great, but and we also have to show about some of that to make sure that the quality is there.
Absolutely. Thank you. Do you want to add anything?
Sure. And what Pam says about, collecting the evidence about the history of this space is incredibly true. I think that what our industry has created is an extremely robust system. However, it costs upwards of $3 to $7 billion per product now as we look at advancing precision medicines. And that is not a sustainable model for our world to exist, especially as our population continues to grow and there's more people to serve. So while Pam, looks at the science of it, I look at often the economics. And when I think of the economics, next year, there's going to be about 2,469 clinical trials that start as of January 2022. That's a rough figure. That's greater than 2,400 opportunities to serve patients in their home, in their community, bringing them closer to science. There's no reason why, if we're going to take medicines to help us live longer, we should be so distant from the design of that science either. People should feel closer to being part of the process, and the trust that will evolve in this paradigm as we continue to learn. I mean, to Pam's point, the pandemic was this huge opportunity to learn about how to do this at scale. We're not even close to doing it at the scale we need to do it. So what's next? We should be leveraging these tools and technologies across trials that are appropriate in the right way. We should be collecting the evidence together collaboratively across industry to demonstrate that we're really in it for the patient experience. And we should do it not just to make medicines happen faster or to solve a pandemic problem, but we should do it because patients should be a part of the development of medicines. We should make sure that bridge is built from what we've learned so far.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you there. So what makes your platform unique? Perhaps maybe you want to talk about some of your specific products that I saw on your website.
Sans, do you want to take that?
Sure. I'll go ahead and take that. Look, Medable, is a physician-owned company. Our CEO, Michelle, was living the problem of trying to execute clinical trials in dermatology and seeing that, folks were just left behind and the technologies did not exist to make that an experience that would be possible for everybody. The geographic barriers, the racial barriers, socioeconomic barriers that present themselves in the process make science an elite factor, actually. And so one of the backbone of how Medable was built was such that all of the technologies could sit on a platform that was more modular and more flexible. It was made so that the industries that would use it would have choice in how they could apply it. It was made so that they were front-facing, patient applications as well as site applications so that we weren't leaving a stakeholder behind. And it's just evolved over time based on what we've learned. When I think about the way we manage science, we do so therapeutically. We address science by patient population, by disease indication. And so the idea was also that we would be smarter about our technology. We would be able to think ahead about what protocols we could make more foundational, what ways we could address medicine the way the industry addresses medicine. And I think partially the adaptability of our platform also makes us the most global option out there today.
I agree. That's so important, being able to update and adapt. I've come across that in the digital health world. If you can't update something or adapt, to new changes or whatever, it's harder. It's a lot harder. Did you want to add something, Pam?
I did. What I wanted to say, what makes Medable's platform so unique is also the experience of the people coming to the table thinking about this problem. We are not just, yes, I represent the clinical trial methodology side, but we have people that come from other industries where things have scaled and things have, bringing product experience from Tesla, from Google. So from all these places that really have years of experience in this, where maybe clinical trials doesn't. And it's sort of this coming together of, why can't we do this? This doesn't make sense. And well, there's regulations and we need to do it this way. In this group of experts that come from all over the place that really this platform is so much more than what a clinical trialist by themselves could have thought of. It brings in all those different experiences, all those different backgrounds that really create something that is quite unique and quite exemplary, I would say.
Do you guys think that decentralized clinical trials lend themselves well, and you could talk about your platform specifically, to a variety of therapeutic areas, or are there some therapeutic areas that you would say, oh, these are better than these?
Well, I would say if you think about decentralized clinical trials, it's not an all or nothing. So it's not as if we're only talking about direct to patient clinical trials. So if you think about it that way, and going back to your angle of patient experience, in every clinical trial, you can make a patient experience better, whether that is the e-consent module alone, whether that is e-diaries and e-COAs. So I think even across the phases, you can do things in phase 1 to phase 4 and across the whole gamut. So I think if you think of it from that perspective, that it's not all or nothing, and it's really modular, and you need to think about the phase of your trial, the patient population, the indication you're looking at, and sort of what you're trying to do, then there's always something you can do better than we've done in the past. And the decentralized element just fits into that. So I'd say it's not, while some might be a little bit easier in the beginning because they're used to telehealth, like in dermatology or certain specialties, they're used to some of those things a little bit more easier. So that might be a little easier entry point, but there really isn't, well, I would say surgery trials, the surgery element wouldn't be part of a DCT, but then the follow-up could be. So even in those circumstances, you can always think of a way to make it more patient-centric and really get information about how the patient lives their daily lives more in the real world, rather than coming into the site and doing a 6-minute walk test and kind of going like, how often can they go around the cone in 6 minutes, versus what does that look like when they're at home and they have to walk their dog or they go to the mailbox or things like that.
Everything Pam says is absolutely right. I would just echo that running a clinical trial is about collecting the right information from patients, from healthcare providers at the right time and in the right way. And applying digital methods to that is a very wide spectrum. It can be something that is truly fully digital remote. It can be something that's just touched by digital to improve the experience of the patient. So we don't make decisions on applying digital technologies because we feel like it. We make them so we make sure that patients are more involved. We get better data. We do so in the mindset of safety and efficacy when we construct these trials. And it is true that every therapeutic area can leverage these digital methods appropriately. We have seen that across the 150 studies ongoing across the world.
I like that. I like how it doesn't have to be an all or none approach. I think that's really important. So you guys talk a lot about the importance of making these trials patient-centered, and there's a lot of talk about that. How are you guys specifically doing that? Can you maybe list a couple of ways that you are trying to make this more patient-centered, this process?
I can maybe get started. So it's really from the beginning to the end. So when we start with configuring a clinical trial for a client that we're working with for certain, pharma company or biotech company, before that even as part of delivering that study, we have an internal patient advisory council that we utilize to sort of do a first check-in, like, will this work? Is this the right way of doing it? Is this understandable? Does this make your life better if we did it this way? So that is one aspect. And then, just other things is, again, being that fit for purpose, starting with the protocol at hand and thinking, if you look at your schedule of events, like what elements of this can we make better, more appropriate and easier for patients to participate in. And I would also say that it's for sites as well, right? It's not just for an improved patient experience. The site also has to have an improved experience. I used to run a site for 12 years. You would not believe the number of different pieces that I had for different studies, and it's all over the place. Different logins, different things. So that is really hard to manage, and to make that experience easier too, so they can focus on staying in touch with their patients and having that direct relationship with the patient, so that we know that the data submitted is the right data and everybody is. It all comes back to keeping participants safe and collecting the right information and collecting correct information.
I think that Pam is emphasizing the capabilities, the features, the way we interact on our interfaces. But I'd like to emphasize something else as well. There's a reason why there's distrust in medicine. There's distrust in a clinical trial process. It has been misused. And part of our opportunity is to ensure that patients see this as a transparent opportunity to be part of science. They see that their investment, their time, is being used wisely, and that better medicines are made for it. And one day they can be treated and potentially cured for disease. And so this word clinical research in and of itself sounds exhausting. One of our opportunities is to make it less so and to make it better understood. So there's a public awareness piece to this, there's an education piece. Let's not forget, being a part of clinical research earlier is also part of preventative medicine. This is not just about making something to treat somebody. It's also about how we do research in general.
I totally agree with that. I mean, and you hear people talking now, and there is such a distrust in the process. So making it transparent and easy to understand for people is critical. I wanted to ask you, you guys have a lot of top females in executive positions at your company. Do you think that makes a difference? How do you think that steers your company differently, the corporate culture?
I think it all comes back to diversity, just as much as you would want diversity in your clinical trials, because that represents better answers. Diversity in an executive team does the same. And so it goes across racial and ethnic, it goes across gender, it goes across all those things. There's been studies done that the more diversity you have, the better solutions you will create and the more innovation you will have. So I think, and it comes to, it's just part that females are as badass as males, right? I mean, that's the other part of it. We've done the same things, we've learned the same things, we might think about things a little bit differently, but that's the opportunity here, is to bring all those different various aspects together, is what I would say, and to be good role models for our daughters and nieces and all those things.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, shout out to our CEO, of course,
Right.
Michelle Longmire,
Yes.
For having the courage to just trust her instincts and pick people who she thinks that she can learn from and who can help her lead this organization, despite their sex or age or race, etc. Certainly, I think that we have one of the most interesting dynamics I've ever seen. The kind of the comfort zone of women is so broad. The experience is broad and different. And so that certainly adds to the way we think about the company, the things we do, the things we invest in, how we talk about research. And it's great to see. And I do hope that it's meaningful to our industry as well.
Absolutely. I think it's great. More power to you guys. So let's say you had a crystal ball in front of you right now. What do you think comes next for clinical research or healthcare during this unprecedented time, really?
So I'm going to let you go first, Sans, while I calm down my dog.
Look, we have never seen a time where science and technology have converged this way. We have watched technology take new heights across tons of industries, and science has been a little slower to connect to that, right? We've observed this S-curve across many industries. I see the future here. Healthcare research is not going to be about life sciences anymore. It's going to be about every industry, because it's about every person. And so I can tell you that what we see in our innovation in life sciences will adapt to consumer, will adapt to broader elements of healthcare. And that's certainly the future. This was one of the toughest puzzles to hack. We had the opportunity because of a pandemic to do that. And there's surety that these technologies, whether it's packaged in clinical trials or packaged in another way, will see greater adoption across multiple adjacent markets and not just in life sciences and health. And we hope that's the case, because it's definitely better for all patients and consumers.
Absolutely.
So what I would add to that maybe is as an additional view that I think we are moving closer to the learning healthcare system, where every interaction that a patient has with not only with their healthcare providers, but if you think about it, the Internet of Things, like your coffee pot knows when you wake up in the morning. So how can we use those things to really learn about health and create this holistic picture of what health looks like in the future using what we have? So I think every interaction that a human does on Earth at some point will help to create a better health situation for everyone on Earth. And I think with decentralization, we're inching closer to that. And I really hope that in the future, there's this world where we have the evidence of, what is best bed rest for people that are pregnant? Because now it's like bed rest, is that like 24/7? Can you get up to go to the table? What does that all look like? There's so many things we don't quite know yet that we can start learning now that we've never learned, like how genomics was a whole new aspect into health. I think this the data gathered through technology will bring a number around sleep. As a doctor, we would ask, did you sleep well? And they said yes or no. And they were like, oh, okay. But we kind of didn't know what that meant and how that really played into things. So I think that is the future, where there's a world in which every interaction we have will contribute to all of our health in the future.
I like that. I like that a lot. That's probably how, the true definition of holistic, kind of, figuring out those factors and to make us healthier and improve our prevention, which we're not very good at. Sans and Pam, I want to thank you guys so much for joining today. I want to thank our viewers for joining in. I hope you guys learned something. One final question: if folks want to learn more about your company, where can they go? Do you have any social media? All of that stuff.
Well, yeah, of course, they can go to our website, www.medable.com. We're certainly living and discussing a lot of these topics on LinkedIn and many other social platforms.
Perfect. I'll include that in the podcast description so folks can know. Well, thank you guys so much. I wish you a lot of luck, and please keep us informed at Trial Site News of anything, new things you guys come out with. Thanks to everyone else for joining in today.
Thank you very much for having us and talking to us about all these super interesting things.
Absolutely. Sure thing. I'm just going to hit stop recording. Adrian is smarter than me, so he knows what to cut out and what not to. What kind of dog do you have, Pam?